In those days, the Crest was in service to Steward Captain Auxilia of the Drift. Having been dispatched to investigate a seemingly abandoned and haunted drift ship, a squad, led by the Lieutenant and Master Sergeant Irongull, discovered the ship to in fact be haunted, but not abandoned. After setting the Wraith to flight, the Lieutenant pursued into the hold, where the squad was ambushed by seemingly mad members of the ship's crew. After a brief skirmish, they were subdued, and it was discovered that glowing runes marked their flesh. The lieutenant cast about for an arcane cause, while the rest of the squad set about securing the crew. Welcome back for another episode of Errant Adventures. As always, I'm your game master and solo player, Steve Morrison. On this week's episode, Ben faces the reality of being a member of a mercenary company. Find out what happens on episode 2, Hard Choices. So as we move into our third scene, which is going to be determine what happened to the Drift crew, we are going to bump our chaos factor up to 7 to reflect the chaotic nature of the last scene. Once again, we were able to pretty handily overcome the obstacle of those crew members attacking. But I think because of the sort of chaotic nature of that experience, we're going to bump the chaos factor up again. So our chaos factor is up to 7, and I'm going to roll my d10 and compare it against that number to see how this scene setup plays out. I got a 3, which is below my chaos factor and is an odd number, which means it is an altered scene. So the altered scene is going to be the next logical scene idea. So my original scene setup idea is that they were going to determine what happened to the crew. But I think with the way that we left it last episode, the runes on their faces and on their bodies are beginning to glow brighter and brighter. And Ben looks up at Lephalia and says, "Lieutenant, what are we to do? They seem to be glowing and it's getting brighter and brighter in this room." And Lephalia is just studying them with this look of interest. And she is going to say, "Why, we should probably see if we can stop them. I think it is possible they are going to explode." Oh, wouldn't that be a sight to see? And as the other members of the Crest kind of take a step back from the prone figures whose runes are starting to glow brighter and brighter, Ben turns around and is there anything that he can do? Why don't we go ahead and let him have a chance to try and study the situation. So this is going to be, once again, when things are getting charged or tense and you try to work out what is happening around you, roll plus sly. I'm going to roll 2d6 and add my sly of 1, and we'll see what happens. 7 on the dice plus 1 for sly is going to be 8 total. So this is going to be a success with a complication. So on a 7 to 9, I get to ask 2 of the following questions. Where is my best escape route, way in or way past? How is one of my adversaries vulnerable to me right now? What am I missing? Who or where is my enemy really? Who's actually pulling the strings here? Who or what here could be a useful opportunity for me? So I think to Ben's mind, the most important question is, where is my best escape route? And I think we are going to ask the fate chart, is the best way to get out of this situation to retreat back up onto the deck of the ship? I'm going to say it's probably unlikely. So this is a chaos rank of 7. Unlikely. I'm going to roll my 2d10, my percentile dice, and we're going to find out what is the best way forward. 75, which is going to be a no. No, going that way is not the way to escape. I think the other question that we could ask is killing these sailors going to be the quickest way to disable whatever these runes are? And again, I'm going to, for this one, say very unlikely. And this is going to be a chaos rank of 7. And that's a 16. 16 on very unlikely is a yes. So yes, killing them is going to stop whatever interaction is happening in their bodies. And Ben looks around, looks at Lephalia and says, Lieutenant, do you think we can escape this, or should we take more drastic measures? And Lephalia is studying them. Again, they're getting brighter and brighter. At this point, it's getting almost like the sun is shining inside of this room. And she says, I do not believe that we can outrun them. Perhaps the best way forward is to, well, eliminate the problem. And Iron Gull, wasting no time, is going to say, all right, lads, you heard her. Kill him. And they are going to set about butchering these members of the Drift crew. Now, I think that Ben is unaccustomed to this sort of blasé, straightforward, no questions asked action. And he is struggling, like he's shaken a little bit, I think, as he looks around and sees the other members of the crest drawing their blades and stepping forward and driving them into the chests of these sailors who, to his mind, are innocent as far as he can tell, although they did attack and they do seem mad, but this madness is not necessarily something that is their fault. And I think he is struck a little bit here as this happens, that this is not what he was expecting out of this moment. And I think Iron Gull is going to look at him and say, Winestone, don't hesitate. Do your duty. And I think this is going to be, if you remember from last episode, we had a 1 hold that the patron, in this case Iron Gull, held over Ben, and he is ordering Ben to kill one of these individuals. And Ben has a choice here. He can refuse the obligation, duty, or debt and make a roll for it, or go ahead and follow the order. I think Ben is looking at his blade. He's looking at this rune that is burning brighter and brighter on the sailor at his feet, and he's going to have to make a choice. I'm going to leave it up to the fate chart in this case. So I'm going to ask the fate chart, does Ben follow Iron Gull's order? I'm going to say it's 50-50. Here we go. 57 on the fate chart is a yes. Yes, he does follow Iron Gull's orders. Taking a deep breath, he looks down at the sailor at his feet, whispers a quiet prayer, says, Lupercus, have mercy. And he is going to drive the blade into the man's chest. And as the blade strikes true and severs the tendrils of life that this sailor has, that rune, that light from the rune begins to fade. As the room settles back down into darkness, there's this heavy silence here. There's this weight in the room. And Ben looks around and their eyes are kind of still adjusting. And so he's blinking a little bit and looking at his fellow soldiers, and they are wiping away blood from their blades and resheathing them. There are a couple who are also newer recruits like he is, who one of them turns and just vomits off to the side there. Ben, watching this happen, takes out a cloth and wipes the blood from his blade. He takes a deep breath and swallows, and he, having been in the Hartvale Navy in the midst of a war, he's fought before, he's killed even, but nothing quite like this, and he is struggling over these feelings of disgust and anger, but also understanding that Iron Gull and the lieutenant made a decision, and they don't know what those runes were going to do. They don't know what might have been unleashed if they hadn't taken action. And he is going to take a deep breath and look around. The lieutenant has stepped past now and is examining one of the bodies. And it looks as though she's looking for that rune. And I'd say as she looks, let's ask the fate chart. Is that rune still present, or does it vanish once the crew is dead? So I'm going to say it's 50-50. 33. So yes. Yes, it is still present. So she is there, crouched down, studying it. And as she does that, we have one more question from our study a situation, which I think is going to be who's actually pulling the strings here. And I think Ben takes it upon himself to also study one of the corpses. And he begins to leaf through the pockets and is looking for any sort of information on who these people were or what might have caused this. And does he find anything? Let's go ahead and ask the fate chart. So I'm going to say it is unlikely that he finds something on this random sailor. So, in fact, I'm going to say it's very unlikely that he finds something. So does Ben find any information on this random drift sailor? Very unlikely. 13 is actually a yes. Yes, he does. So what does he find here? And let's roll on action and subject to see if that gives us a clue. So we've got 89, attract, and 25, attract, friendship. Okay, so what he finds on this sailor's body is a letter. And it is a letter from someone who works for the merchant family whose insignia is stamped on the crates. And as Ben pulls it out and looks at it, he begins to read, and it is this carefully constructed letter that is imploring this person, this sailor, to come work for this merchant family. And I think what Ben realizes is that this person that he's looking at, this person whose life he snuffed out, was one of the sort of higher ranking crew hands on this ship. And This letter, which is addressed from a foreman in the merchant family's network, is trying to bring this person over. And I think there is a line in there that Ben looks at that says something along the lines of, when you get this letter, don't board your ship back. Stay here and, help us out here, and you'll be well compensated for it. And there's an undercurrent of don't get back on that ship because it's dangerous. So that is what we find. So I think Ben stands up and turns around and hands this letter to Iron Gull and says, "Sergeant, I believe this might be of use to us. It appears that someone was trying to recruit this man from this ship and bring him into the service of the Vidala family. It seems strange that he would ask for this deckhand not to return to his ship, but instead to stay on the dock where they delivered their first shipment." And Iron Gull looks at it and says, "Huh. That is interesting," and tucks it into his pocket and says, "We'll have to worry about that later. For now," and he turns to the lieutenant at this point, "are we in further danger from these, whatever it was?" And Lephalia stands and says, "I don't believe so. It is, of course, possible, but I sense that the magical energy has gone dormant at this point. It was likely powered by the life force of each of these poor souls. If we had not destroyed them, I believe they would have destroyed us." And at this, she looks around at the other Crest soldiers and says, "Keep this in mind. If we had not done as we did, we would all be dead now. Well, all of you would be dead. Now, let's carry on," and is going to turn and face deeper into the hold as she says, "I still have a wraith to capture." And that's where we're going to end our third scene. And the chaos factor is going to go up to 8, as that was a pretty chaotic set of events. Did not expect that to happen, but that's why we play these games. So as we look to our next setup, I think it's going to be find the Wraith deeper in the hold is going to be our next setup. And we are going to go ahead and roll our D10 and see what this scene looks like. I actually rolled a 9, which is above the chaos factor. So this scene is going to play out as we expect. So as they continue deeper into the hold, they don't come across any other sailors or evidence of any further crew. And I think this does strike them as odd because they were attacked by a number of crew, but there were not nearly as many as you would expect to find on a ship of this size. And so they are continuing to creep forward and continue deeper and deeper into this hold, and they reach an area where the walls and the door are covered once again in this frost. And Lephalia holds up a hand and she says, see, this is a sign that we are on the right track. Now quickly, go forward and let us see what we discover inside. And she is going to push a hand and the door shatters as the wood panels of the door are frozen solid and they just disintegrate into dust and ice chunks. And then she gestures and Iron Gull turns to Ben, and Ben turns and says, "Haven't I gone first enough?" And Iron Gull smiles, actually, which is a little terrifying coming from the sergeant, and says, "Not nearly enough as you think. Now get in there." And Benn is going to push forward into this room. The others are following along behind him. As they enter the deeper hold of this ship, I think the first thing that they feel is that chill in the air. The air is frigid, and it's in basically like the middle of summer right now in Heartvale, which is very warm. And so the idea that they are in this freezing cold place is just baffling a little bit. And all of them tense up as they slowly progress forward, looking around, studying the area, trying to determine if more of the crew are going to jump out and attack them. And I think that is a fair question. So why don't we ask the fate chart? So we're going to say that it is, I think, likely that more of the crew are going to attack them, because I don't think all of the crew have been accounted for yet. So our chaos factor is 8, and we are going to roll on this. 63 likely, yes. Yes, they are going to be set upon by more of these crew members, and they come charging out. I think looking at them, do these crew have those runes on them as well? I'm going to say it's 50-50. 95, which is a no. No, they do not have the runes on them. So Iron Gull sees this. I think Lephalia says, I don't sense the runes on them. And Iron Gull says, try to subdue these ones. And the Crest soldiers are going to wade into battle. And at this point, we are going to go ahead and engage in combat. So once again, when you attack someone with the intent to do harm, roll plus fierce. On a hit, 10 plus or 7 to 9, choose one of the following. So we are going to roll 2d6 plus 1 fierce and see what happens. 5 plus 1 is going to be a 6, which is a fail. Not good. So I get nothing here. So I get no bonuses. I get no, I don't get a chance to inflict harm or reduce the amount of harm I take. So there are more of them this time. And Benn and the other Crest soldiers are set upon, and they are going to get clobbered. And Benn is going to take 1 harm as he gets hit by 2 of these cudgels. And again, these crew, it's strange because they're not carrying weapons in the way that you would expect crewmen on a ship to carry. They're carrying cudgels and like pieces of debris from the ship. And they're just charging forward, like screaming and frothing at the mouth and swinging these things. And Benn absorbs some into his armor, and he is still going to take a little bit of harm from that, and that's going to mark off 1 box out of 5 on his list of harms. And then we are going to make the harm move. So taking harm. When you suffer harm, roll plus harm suffered. And this is going to be at +1, and we are going to see what happens. 5 plus 1 is 6, which is a miss. So on a miss, the MC, which is me, can choose something from the 7 to 9 lists above. If she does, it's in place of some of the harm you're suffering, so you take -1. Nope. So I'm going to say Benn is going to take the full harm. He's just going to suffer that harm. He is going to also, I think, get knocked over and is struggling to regain his footing as I think the Wraith makes an appearance in the hold. And Lephalia steps forward and she speaks a word of power, and the hold that they're in shudders and shakes. And I think Ben and the other crest are overwhelmed by this, and I think they're going to have to actually make a face duress. So when you do something difficult where your ability to do so is seriously in question, roll plus steady. This is resisting the power that Lephalia is displaying in this very small room as she unleashes some sort of dire sorcery on this wraith. Ben is struggling to maintain his focus, regain his footing, and we are going to roll plus steady, which is +2. 4 on the dice, +2 is 6, which is a fail. So I think he is going to go ahead and suffer another harm. In this case, I'm going to say it's 2 harm because I don't think his armor actually plays into this, that it actually mitigates this in any way, as he gets blasted and buffeted by this burst of energy that emanates out from Lephalia. The wraith gets rocked back as well, as do the other crew that are trying to attack them. But Ben and his fellow crest soldiers are going to take some of this as well. And we're going to roll another taking harm move, and this time it's +2. All right, so we got a 9 that time. So this is going to be on a 7 and 9. I can choose one. Lose your footing, lose your grip on whatever you're holding, lose track of someone or something you're attending to. You miss noticing something important. Let's say we miss something important, and let's go ahead and ask our oracle with the action and subject to see what that is. So we got 33, stop, and 12, opposition. Stop, opposition. So you miss something important, and it's stop, opposition. I think the thing that Ben misses that's important here is that some of the crew escape. Those crew, they're mad faces, they get buffeted back, and a couple of them tumble out through the door. And I think as Ben is shaking his head and trying to focus and restore his faculties, that he and the others miss that those ones tumble out the door, and then I think they disappear. They don't come back in. And so Ben is, again, struggling to his feet. This power emanates throughout the room, and there's silence for a moment. And then the wraith shrieks and charges in towards Lephalia. And the other crew that are still in this room are going to stand, and they still have those mad looks on their faces, and they shriek, and the shriek that they emit is the same as the shriek from the wraith, and they are going to charge forward. Ben barely gets himself back up to his feet, shakes his head, and we are going to engage in combat once again. This time plus fierce, +1, 7, +1 is 8 for a partial success. So this is going to be, you attack with vigor, you inflict +1 harm, you parry their blows, you take -1 harm, you battle aggressively, you inflict +2 harm but take an additional +1 harm yourself, or you fight defensively, you inflict -1 harm but take an additional -2 harm to yourself. I think he is going to attack with vigor, and this is going to deal an additional harm, which is going to take out a couple of these guys as they charge in at him, their cudgels raised. He is going to stab one in the stomach and sort of spin away as the other one's cudgel comes down and cracks off of his shoulder. He grunts a little bit, throws out a fist, and punches the man in the face. The man sort of stumbles for a moment, and then Ben swings around and viciously brings the blade across and cuts the other sailor down. I think the other crest follow this example. They're not trying to subdue at this point. They're hurt. They're bruised. This wraith is shrieking in and around them, and this battle is raging on. I think Lephalia is, well, let's actually ask the fate chart and see how she is faring. So is she, in the course of this battle, able to contend with and contain this wraith? We are going to say it is 50-50. Our chaos factor is 8. 65. Yes, she is. Okay, so she is standing in the midst of this room, this chaos that is unleashing around her. The soldiers of the crest, Sergeant Irongull, Benn Winestone, all the others who have come with them are fending off these maddened, crazed sailors as they are coming in with these pieces of debris, treating them like cudgels, swinging, and this struggle ensues. And Lephalia, standing at the heart of this storm, is going to extend her hand. Her fingers twist almost supernaturally, almost inhumanly, and the wraith, swooping towards her, careening at her with a shriek, stops inches away and is twisted up, and Lephalia is speaking in a low mutter. She is saying these words again and again as her fingers are twisting and turning and her hands are moving, and she draws in this wraith, and she produces with one hand a small crystal orb, which she holds aloft, and she speaks again these words of power, and it's not as strong this time. It's not as intense, but this wave of energy releases from her, and the wraith shudders, and it is drawn into that crystal. And as soon as its essence is absorbed into the heart of this crystal orb, the room falls silent. Those crew, those sailors who are still alive and trying to attack, they fall slack and collapse to the floor. And there is silence in the room as Lephalia stands in the center of this destruction and this bloodshed. And she turns to Irongull and says, "My work here is done. I shall return to the boat and await the rest of you." And she turns and walks out. There's silence for a moment as the crest soldiers watch the lieutenant leave, and a couple of the more experienced members chuckle and shrug and kind of wipe their blades clean of the blood and then start going about checking the bodies. Those new recruits, including Ben, are struck for a moment as they stare after the lieutenant. One of them sidles up to Ben and is like, "Is she serious? She's just leaving like that?" And Ben says, "It would appear so. She's a curious sort." Irongull, who steps up beside them, claps Ben on the shoulder and says, "You have no idea, kid. Although I think you're starting to get some idea. You look a little beat up. You all right?" And Ben, who is a little bruised and battered, there's probably some blood running out of his ears and nose, nods and says, "I have not been that close to an epicenter of sorcery like that in, well, I think ever." Irongull says, "Yeah, well, you'll get used to that too." And turns and says, "All right, I want a full inventory. I want a full count of those who survived and the dead. We're going to have to make a report to the drift about this, and I want to have all of our details. Let's search the rest of the ship, see if there's anything else, any other crew around here, and we'll finish up and go home. So we are going to go into our next scene. I think despite the fact that that was a little chaotic, I think the fact that they were able to overcome the Wraith means that the chaos factor is actually going to go back down to 7. And this is going to be just search the ship. So we are going to roll our D10 and see how this setup goes. It's a 6, which is below, and it is an even number, which means it's an interrupt scene. Interrupt scenes are a little bit different because we're not going to play out the next logical scene. This is going to be a randomly determined event, and to do that, we're going to roll on the event focus table. 16 is NPC action. And then we are going to roll on event meaning and the action and subject here. 21, release. 79, release vehicle. So this is an NPC action and it's release vehicle. Okay, so I think they are beginning to search the ship when Lephalia very quickly comes back into the hold, and she says, "Sergeant Irongull, attend me for a moment." And the sergeant approaches, and she says, "Sergeant, we have an interesting conundrum. I believe our boat is gone." And Irongull says, "What?" She says, "I went to return to the boat, and it is missing. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" And I think Irongull looks around, looks to Benn, because Benn is the most seafaring of them. And Benn shrugs and says, "It's possible that someone took the boat, though I don't know who." And I think Irongull says, "Wait, we were attacked by 10. And he counts. He's like, "There are 3 missing. Everybody, find those 3 and find the boat." And they're going to rush back up to the top deck. So they're going to look around, and I think it's going to be a fate chart question on whether or not they still see the boat. I think it is very likely that they can see the boat from the top deck. And this is going to be chaos factor of 7. 38 is a yes. Yes, they can see the boat rowing away, and they see 3 of these crew in the boat. And Lephalia looks out and says, "Oh, I must have missed them." "Oh, where are you going?" she shouts out. And they seem like they're rowing faster. And Benn says, "There's no way we're getting that boat back." Lephalia says, "Oh, ye of little faith, fresh blood." She turns, extends out a hand, and closes it into a fist. And the water in front of the boat begins to bubble, and waves begin to form that start to buffet this small rowboat. And as this happens, the sailors in it are trying to row faster and faster, but they're making no progress as the water suddenly seems to have a mind of its own, and it carries the boat back to the side of this drift ship. And the crest soldiers are all standing at the railing, looking down as the boat clunks back up against the wooden side of the drift ship that they're standing on. And Irongull calls down to the sailors and says, "Where you lads think you're going?" And they look up, and they're not mad in the same way that they were before. They are terrified. They're wide-eyed, and one of them says, "We had to get out of here. That thing was controlling us." And Iron Gull says, "That thing's not your problem anymore. We took care of it. Now, stealing our boat, that is your problem. Now tie it off and get back up here." And the 3 sailors are going to look around, see that they are essentially arcanely held here by this ring of water that is bubbling around them. And one of them ties it off, and they climb back aboard. As the sailors climb back aboard, Iron Gull turns and points at a few of the Crest soldiers and says, "You two, keep an eye on these, question them. The rest of you, spread out, search the ship. Let's figure this out." Ben was one of the ones chosen to remain and guard these sailors. And so he is going to sidle up next to one of them and say, "Tell me, why are you here? Why did you run? What happened to you all?" And the sailor is sort of clammed up and isn't saying much. And Ben is going to try and study a person. So he's watching this sailor and is trying to figure out what's going on with these people. What happened to them? So he's going to study a person. This is going to be 2d6 plus his sly. That's a 10 plus 1 is an 11. So he gets to ask 3 questions. The 3 questions are, what does this character really want? What is this character's current plan? What does this character wish I would do? What is this character leaving out? How could I get this character to tell me more information? Can I actually trust this character to be honest on their information? So I think the first thing we're going to ask is, what is this person leaving out? And let's go ahead and ask the fate chart, are they leaving anything out? Beyond, of course, just not wanting to answer the questions because they're afraid of these Crest soldiers. So is there anything important, maybe, that they're leaving out? And I think that is 50-50. 85 is a no. No, they're not leaving anything important out. So I think this sailor begins to tell them about what happened and is basically telling them, like, we were sailing. It was a pretty routine mission, and we reached our destination, and he names a small sort of port that's down the coast a bit, outside of sort of Heartvale's controlling sphere, but not quite far enough to be down to any of the like major cities. He's like, we delivered our cargo as we were supposed to. We were doing a patrol of the coastline, and the Vidala family hired us to also carry some cargo. We reached our destination. We unloaded the cargo, and they refused to pay us and said that we had to come back this way anyways, so we might as well transport some additional cargo back to Heartvale, and we would receive double the sum when we returned. And our captain decided that sounded like a good deal, so we went ahead and loaded up the cargo, and I think we made it most of the way back, and then everything's a little foggy after that. So that is one question. What does this person really want? I think they want to go home. That's part of why they got off the ship. They were afraid of what was going on, and they were hoping to make it away from here and get away from that wraith, which they all of a sudden realized was controlling them. Can we actually trust what this person is saying? And I think that's another great question for the fate chart. I think it's likely. I think based on the fact that we got a positive result that he was not hiding anything important. I think it's likely that we can trust what he's saying. 91. No, we cannot trust what he's saying. So Ben listens to this. He gets the sense that what he's saying is true, that this man is not leaving out any information that is important in this, but there's something not quite right. And Ben is studying him. He's looking at this and he says, you know, I understand that it can be terrifying to end up in a situation like this, but really, you must tell me the truth. You must tell me everything if I am going to help you. And I want to help you. I want to keep you safe. That's why we're here. And we are also in service to the Drift right now, as your people are, as this ship was. What really happened? What aren't you telling us? And he's going to persuade with leverage. So this is when you try to convince someone to do or say something for you by using something you have against them or offering to give them what they want. Roll plus wily. So I think this is basically him trying to convince this sailor that, like, look, we're on the same side. Help me out here. Help me help you, if you will. So we're going to roll plus wily, which is 0 for Ben. That's too bad. And so it's just what the dice say. 5. A miss. The sailor looks at Ben and says, I don't know you, and I don't know your people. And he looks around at these soldiers that are wearing a medallion that isn't necessarily the most recognizable in the city. Actually, let's ask the fate chart. Does this sailor know about the crest? Has he heard of the crest? Because I don't think that this ship was gone for like 3 months. So I think that it was a relatively short trip. So this sailor has been around since the crest have been in Heartvale. But also the Drift is a somewhat separate civilization from Heartvale proper. So I'm going to say it is very unlikely that he has heard of the crest. 91. He has not heard of the crest. So he says, I don't know you and I don't know your people. I don't know why you're on this ship. All I know is that you and your friends killed some of my comrades. I saw the bodies on the way out. I saw that you butchered them. Why would I tell you anything else? Do your worst. And he's going to clam up. Do they find anything else of interest on this drift ship? There's still the captain and a bunch of the rest of the crew who are missing. Do they find them somewhere on the ship? I think it is impossible. I think it's impossible that they find the captain and the other crew. I don't think they're on this ship. But let's ask the fate chart. Chaos rank is 7. 0, 1. Which is not only a yes, but an exceptional yes. So they find the captain and the rest of the crew. Are they alive? Are they sane? I mean, we have established that possession faded once Lephalia took control of the Wraith and absorbed it into this orb. So presumably, they wouldn't be affected by that same thing. But if that's the case, why haven't they come out yet? What's going on here? And I'm actually going to ask the fate chart, are the captain and the rest of the crew alive? Or did they die and only those who survived are the ones who were overcome by this madness. I think it's 50-50. I don't know if they're alive or dead. 18 is a yes. Yes, the captain and crew are still alive. So I think in the course of their investigation of the ship, they find a forward hold that has been locked and barred. And Iron Gull orders that door to be broken open. And when it is, they find inside the rest of the crew, living in absolute filth, wasted away as they've been trapped in here for close to a week. And the captain, who is standing in the back, sort of barely able to hold herself up, steps forward and has to like hold on to beams in the hold in order to stay upright. And Iron Gull steps through, sort of shows no reaction to the really, really foul smell that emerges, looks around, looks to the captain, and says, "What happened here?" Thanks for listening to Errant Adventures, and thanks so much to Syrinscape for the lovely ambient sounds and music throughout the episode. If you enjoyed the show, please tell anyone and everyone in your life about it. And if you haven't already, please rate and review the show on your favorite podcast app. It really does help others find me. If you want to interact with me, my handle on Instagram and Twitter is @ErrantSoloPod, or you can email me at errantsolopod@gmail.com. I also post short fiction and campaign-related materials on my website, errantadventurespod.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next time.